All right, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the podcast. I'm so excited for the guest that we have today. I actually been in touch with her for a long time, maybe over a year, and she's so busy and she does incredible work. And if anything, like if you guys follow her or know who she is, you know she's been trying to push this health and wellness movement from a medical side, and I think it's good we're allowing our value and actually have a good conversation today, so that way you guys, the listener, can take something away and figure out how to take care of your health and actually think long term what you can do like for your lifespan, right, and your health span. So, you know, without further ado, I want to welcome Dr. Amy West, who is a sport medicine physiatrist. So, Amy,
Yes.
Please welcome to the show. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. We've been trying to put this together for a while, so it's good.
I know, and I'm so happy we were able to make it work.
Yeah.
I know you have a long commute, so I appreciate that.
It's all good.
So before we dive in, can you just tell the listener a little bit about your background? I know you dropped some gem that you used to be a sound engineer in a past life.
Yes. Yeah.
So let's dive into a little bit how you got into like the medical field.
Okay. So my job right now, I'm a sports medicine physician for Northwell Health. I work for them. It's the biggest health system in New York at the moment. So I'm sports medicine, basically do non-operative orthopedics, so aches, pains, injuries, all of that. I did all my medical school and residency training in Boston at Harvard, so I was there for about 10 years. My primary training is in physical medicine and rehabilitation, which is a really small field within medicine. Most people don't know it exists, don't know what we do, but essentially we focus on the physical manifestations of disease processes in the body. So long story short, we look at how disease affects people physically, and we try to help with that. So I'm a physiatrist by training, and then I did a fellowship in sports medicine, and I work with some sports teams now. I'm one of the team physicians for Hofstra University on Long Island. And so that's kind of medically what I do. I've been CrossFitting for about 10, 12 years, and I got involved with that during med school, and I try to incorporate sort of the principles of function and functional movements into my practice. And as physiatrists, we're sort of doctors of function, so kind of there's a nice kind of crossover there, just my interests and what I do in practice. So prior to getting into medicine, like you said, I was working in television for a period of time. I was working in editing and producing. I did some work in New York City and in London, doing different television shows and things like that. Ended up getting a job as a surgical videographer at Columbia University Hospital, which sort of gave me my first taste of like what medical world was like. So then I thought, maybe I should do that. So long story short, I went back to school and did all my sciences and ended up in med school. But that's kind of how I got there. But
I mean, the way you say it, you make it sound so easy. Like,
it wasn't.
Like Nick could just stop recording and then go to med school right now.
Yeah, I mean, so it took a long time, I'll tell you that. I had basically just had like sort of rehauled my whole life, went back to school and was doing that. I had to do all my sciences over again and get back into that mode of thinking. It was about 3 years of that and then applying and all that. But yeah, so it was a lot of work, but definitely worth it in the end, but just took a long time to get there.
Well, I love this story, right? Because we have young listener listen to this, and like the way you just say it is so nonchalant, like as it was like, oh yeah, I just kind of flipped the switch and then that. Yeah. What about medicine that you fell in love with to make you go back to do all of that again? Yeah. Because to retake all your sciences, and then you're also competing against kids who've been studying their whole life to go to med school. Yeah. It's like, what about that element of medical?
Well, I mean, I'd always been a physically active person, and I didn't really know how to kind of make that a career really outside of being an actual, athlete. So that was part of my decision making, looking into, well, how can I do this professionally and be thinking about these themes in a way that is productive for the world? Because I found working in television, I didn't necessarily feel like I was contributing much through a variety of different events that occurred kind of in the world, and I was like, I don't know what I'm contributing here as far as like to society. And then I've always been into school as one of those people, so I was like, if you have the capacity to help people and you understand all this stuff, you might as well use it. So that's kind of what drew me back into it. And then I sort of developed a love from there. I mean, there are times when I don't love it, that's for sure. And certainly training is difficult and there's a lot involved there. But yeah, so that's how I kind of got sort of into that mode. But I really like learning. I think that's kind of, you have to want to kind of throw yourself all into learning more things and being uncomfortable in certain situations. And there's something about that spoke to me. I was like a challenge, so that was part of it too. I think for people who are wanting to go to med school or thinking about it, I think probably the most important thing you can do is do something totally different for a while. Because I think, at the end of the day, med schools, they get tons of applications for people who are all super smart. Like that's not going to set you apart necessarily. But if you have some kind of life experience or some kind of roundabout way of getting there, or some kind of interest outside of just like the hard sciences, like they will remember that. They will remember you. They will want to talk to you. they want like interesting people at the end of the day. So I think that was part of what made it maybe what made my journey somewhat almost easier in a sense, was that at the end of the day, in a round of interviews, they probably only spoke to one like television producer that day, Yeah. So I think that helped.
No, I think it's great. And like just hearing your story, it just took me back to when I made that decision to, stop pursuing fitness, but actually go into the field of physical therapy. And my North Star was, well, I was able to help people lose weight, get stronger, etc. But when they get hurt, I have no idea what to do.
Right.
So I'm like, man, that's like an area of interest that I had. I was like, I wonder how cool would that be if I can actually help people get out of pain and then get them to keep pursuing all these other things that they have. So that became my North Star for something to me to pursue upon. Right. What was your North Star when you were going back into the medical school?
I mean, there were a few of them. I think as I developed, certainly as I started honing in more so on like what I wanted to do specifically, because I wasn't really sure going into med school what kind of physician I wanted to be. But then once I discovered the field that I'm in, which is physiatry, I really like the idea of that everyone gets better. So in my field, in the hospitals, you deal with a lot of like really depressing things, death and dying and disability that and people just kind of worsening. Whereas in the rehab space, everyone gets better regardless of where where they're starting out. So I like that idea, and that was really exciting to help help people restore their function in life, and then seeing avenues where you can kind of connect that with the fitness space outside of, once people leave the rehab facility, it's like, okay, then what? And like, how do we connect these people such that they're still practicing these movements and kind of working to improve their function, and that sort of helped. It excited me about the field. At the time I was working when I was a med student, I was working with victims from the Boston Marathon bombing who had lost limbs, and that's right when I started doing like my rotations at the rehab hospital, and like all of these people had lost limbs. Some people were super active before, and seeing them kind of get in that process and kind of regaining their lives again and leaving and like having this whole kind of new lease on life when something really tragic had happened, that was really an exciting thing to see and be part of, to say I kind of had like a little piece in that. So like, stuff like that, stories like that would really kind of, those drive you to want to keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah. I also love the fact that you mentioned in your intro that like you work with, like obviously like diseases that has to do with lifestyle and the whole point of getting people better, it's huge, right? Because people would assume that in the medical field, that's what we do, but not really. If you go in acute, you go in trauma, some people don't get better. Some people, that's just it. And for me, I think I'm fortunate enough to be in this field where I get to actually have a say in changing people's outcome and, their day-to-day, get to actually help them think about their life in a different way. And for you, as you evolve to where you are right now, like what were some key moments that got you to think about like health and lifespan and health span in a different manner, especially from a disease process?
Yeah. So, I mean, one thing in what speaks to me about the field that I'm in, or why I got into it, is that our focus is really quality of life and function. So, even like there's a small subset of people who do like cancer physiatry, and like we don't think about treating the cancer itself. Like that's the oncologist's job. We don't do the chemo. We don't look at anything. But what we do look at is like, how is this chemo or how's this disease going to ravage your body, and how can we make it such that you're able to deal with that and do what you need to do. So I like looking at sort of we're not going after the primary thing. We're looking at sort of the secondary lifestyle things that affect it. So, those kind of things are important to me. It's like, even, if you have ever worked in any kind of critical care setting or ICU, I mean, you see a lot of people who are hooked up to machines and kind of have very, poor prognosis. And, for me, that was always hard to see, because I would say, like, what this person isn't living, right? This person is eventually, it's not going to end well for them, and we're just prolonging the inevitable and looking at all these like horrible kind of outcomes and these depressing kind of people circling the drain until they die. And for me, what's exciting about medicine is like helping people live better regardless of what's going on with them. Is like, how can we make the time that you have, make that, it's more about lifespan it's more about health span than lifespan, right? So it's not how long you live, but how well you're living while you're doing it. And how can we optimize that? Because there's no point in being alive but not being able to be independent, not being able to do things for yourself, not enjoying yourself, not being able to go from point A to point B, so at least in my opinion, right? So I really get excited by the ideas, like, how can we take someone who's maybe not functioning well and make them function better? How can we preserve someone's independence as long as possible? Because at the end of the day, like, medicine as a whole doesn't really focus a lot on that. They're sort of like, are you not sick? Like, that's the main thing. Like, are you not sick? Are you not dying? And like everything beyond that is sort of like, okay, we'll figure it out. Whereas for me, I don't like looking at it that way, because I think there's so much more to life than just like physically, like your age. There's like, how are you living those days? So that's kind of what gets me excited.
No, I love that. So just to kind of talk to the listener there, like, so like, like the way Dr. Amy and I view, lifespan is how long do you live till? What's your age?
Yeah.
What then health span has to do with the quality of life. How well are you living? And like, for all the young listeners, I'm not talking like YOLO, where you get to do all this reckless stuff and then just live your life. But like, because at some point you will get older, and then there'll be consequences for your action of what you do in the past. And what I want to touch upon, I love about this is the medical model right now is exactly that. Like, hey, are you not sick, or are you sick? If so, can we get you not sick?
Right. Yeah.
And then when we get you not sick, okay, great. Go on with yourself, right? Or, hey, are you dying? Great. Let's stop you from dying and then prolong your life. But we just prolong the life without increasing the quality of life. Right. So how then do we get people to start asking questions about, or even educating our patient about, like, okay, hey, maybe don't aim to live to 100. Aim for what you can be able to do when you're at 85, 95 to 100. Right.
Yeah. So, I mean, part of it is, I think also realizing where you're at as far as, when I think about it in terms of physical function anyway. So, there's look at the things that you have to do in your day-to-day life, and are you able to do those things well? And, are you able to get from point A to, at the very most basic level, are you able to get from point A to point B without having to think twice about it? And for some people, the idea of having to walk a mile to go somewhere is a daunting task. So then we say, okay, why is that? Or, can you, there's a certain age, like, where you start, when you get off a couch, where you start making a noise, right? And it's like, well, is that happening to you, and why? And like, it's not acceptable to say like, oh, I'm just that age and this is what happens. Like, my body falls apart. Like, that's not something that should be sort of accepted, no matter how old you are, that you just hit a certain age and you just can't do things anymore. The things you have to do day to day in your life, whether that's with children or, helping parents or whatever, it's like, can you pick this thing up and move it to the other side of the room, and it's not too daunting of a task? Can you go to Costco and, haul all those boxes out to your car by yourself, stuff like that. So part of it's just like making people aware of the things that maybe they could be doing better, that they're not doing well now. I mean, something I tell like a lot of women, this is something that I see a lot, is like, can you stand on one leg? And you'd be surprised some people can't do that. And if you can, you stand on leg, and then can you do a little squat on that side without falling over? And most women can. And it's just, and it's a lot to do with like glute strength and the way people are training and stuff like that. But it's like not till that moment where they go, oh yeah, well, my balance isn't that good. It's like, well, why isn't it good? You know, so I think part of it is just sort of getting people to recognize some of the deficits they have. So, so Kelly Starr, he's a good friend of mine, and like he just put out this book, Built to Move, that has, you know, basically these vital signs of physical activity. And, you know, some of them are very simple, like can you cross your legs and sit down on the ground and then get back up unassisted? And, you know, I think it's shocking to a lot of people when they can't do that, you know. So it's like, all right, so just taking into account sort of this like physical vital sign thing, like what kind of things should you be able to do that you're not able to do, and just recognizing those deficits first. And then you can say, well, how do I address that before it becomes a real problem, right? So, you know, getting up and down off the floor right now for someone who's, you know, middle-aged should be fairly easy. And if it's not, addressing it now before you're 70 years old and you're on the floor and you die as a result of not being able to get up, you know, because that's where that leads to. So, so stuff like that, I think, is sort of like the most basic, like what can you do with your body, and are you doing things well that you want to be able to do?
Wow. Yeah. I mean, like just hearing you saying that is, it's again, confirm what we're doing here. And the whole point of having a facility like this was to make something that is common and addressing it like why it shouldn't be common. Right? But like we talked about pelvic floor before, where like if you're a female athlete, sometimes you lose bladder control. A lot of people are doing it. Doesn't mean it should be happening. Right? Just like just because you can't stand on one leg and you see everyone's falling over, doesn't mean you should be one of them.
Right.
And I think as an adult, and like for me as a physical therapist, when we get our patient in here, we set goals with them. Like, hey, for you to go back to this, we need this. Once you get there, then we'll do this.
Right.
I think us as human, as we get older and older, we stop setting goals. And like, again, you and I work out. We want to set goals to hit PRs. We want to hit a certain benchmark. But for the people who are listening, who like parents running around, driving their kids around, their days get so far ahead of them that they don't have goals that they need to set. And I love to point this out, not to sound daunting on this podcast, but I rather tell people the truth that if you're a female postmenopausal and you're having a hard time balancing on your legs, and God forbid you end up falling, you fracture your hip, you have 1 year mortality rate. Right?
Skyrockets,
and that's one of those things where, okay, well, if you know you're going to get to postmenopausal and your balance is not that good, hey, why don't we do something about it now? So that way when you get there, your risks of fall decrease significantly.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, and certainly when you're talking about things like bone density and bone health, I mean, there's so many things that can set you up so that you're not in a precarious situation later that people aren't thinking about or aren't doing. So, you know, like weight training and stuff like that. I think there's been such a taboo around that with women in particular. So it's another kind of soapbox I get on as far as convincing people to be doing it, also to be eating well. I mean,
so can we go there for a second? Can we get you on that soapbox? Talk about like strength training, especially for female population, female athletes. And just a side note for the parents or the female athletes listening to this, I just talked to a parent yesterday where we had a girl who tore her ACL twice. And we talked about, hey, listen, you're an adolescent, your hormones is out of whack, you're also getting taller, your mechanic changes, and study has shown that if you have your menstrual cycle, you have an increase of tearing your ACL. Right.
Yeah. So there's some. Yeah. So there's. Yeah. And that's a whole other. That's a whole other thing too. So one thing we talk about, especially talking about female athletes in general. So one thing is that less than 6% of all strength and conditioning research is based solely on women. So we're basing all of our protocols and all of our training things based on essentially studies of young men. So that's problem number one. Problem number two is that we look at the trajectory of a male as far as like athletic development, and it's basically just like a straight line up until you hit a certain age. But like young men, you know, they go from teenagers to adults, and they just kind of skyrocket in what they're able to do. Whereas women take this sort of dip around puberty, and there's hormonal changes, physical changes, body fat redistribution, all these things that kind of occur where, you know, you're on this trajectory, and then all of a sudden it takes a dip. You're not able to do the same things as easily for a period of time, or your training has to adjust somewhat. You're also dealing with all these other things going on in your body that make it harder to just be more physically active, and learning how to sort of recalibrate yourself. So all this stuff happens, and we don't really, as of right now, we're not doing a great job of adjusting training around this. We tend to lose a lot of girls in sports around that age because they just kind of give up on it. People get hurt in ways that they weren't expecting, and so there's a whole kind of this kind of thing that's very different that I think it's hard for someone to understand, because it's like you get bigger, you get stronger. That's what happens, right? And it's like, well, for women it's a little different. So, but part of that is introducing strength training at that age, because when you talk about a girl who's tore her ACL twice, there's some biomechanical things, like just physical characteristics that make people more prone to that. But then there's a whole way of moving that makes you less likely to have that happen. And we just don't really train girls on how to avoid that very well, as far as like they're saying, like gluteal strength, for example, or jumping landing techniques, just general weight training so that they're stronger. Again, like guys are encouraged to kind of go in the weight room and kind of start benching and all this stuff. And like girls are not as psyched about that for a multitude of reasons. But one is sort of what they know about it and don't know about it. Part of it is like they have this like fear that they're just going to become like this like she beast, and like it's just all very kind of taboo. I think we're starting to break that a little bit, but that's still kind of in its infancy, I think, as far as like encouraging it more. So, and then there's this whole about what people are eating, and what's certainly like protein. People are not, girls are not eating enough, like as much as they think they should be eating. They're just not even touching that. So, stuff like that. So there's multiple things that contribute to it, but there are ways to kind of improve that for sure.
What are some of the advice that you would give parents of like young female athletes or parents themselves, who also like, especially the mom, to slowly figure out ways to start getting into the gym, start weight training?
Yeah, so another thing to think about too, when we're talking about females specifically, and I've seen this in men too, is actually looking at like bone health and things of like what was traditionally known as like female athlete triad, and now it's called RED-S, or relative energy deficiency in sport. Basically, it's an energy in, energy out imbalance, which if you're not eating enough and you're training a lot, then you can end up with a bunch of hormonal derangements, the first of which, what we see in women usually, is menstrual dysfunction, but then that leads to impaired bone quality, and then we see stress fractures. So by the time someone's in my office with a stress fracture, they usually have a bunch of other things going on. And if you don't treat all those other things, they'll just keep getting stress fractures. So then it becomes a recurrent problem for them. Plus, women, like we lay down most of our bone mass by the time we're like in our early 20s. So if it's deranged when you're 14, 15, there's kind of no going back on that. You got to fix it then, because by the time you reach, your early 20s, that's it. So you can have a lifetime of issues as a result. So why I say this, because it's really important for parents of girls especially to realize that, if we're not eating well, if we're not eating enough for training, if we're not weight training specifically, which helps bone density, bone quality, that can lead to a lifelong issue, lifelong problems. So it's really important to kind of encourage girls to be doing that stuff early. As far as like getting people into the gym and like pointers for that, I think part of it is like the gym's really daunting. So, I'm a CrossFitter, and that's what I like doing. But part of the reason I encourage people to do is that part of it is you just show up and they kind of tell you what to do. It takes very little kind of thought on your part as far as like, having to come up with a plan and like how to use your time efficiently. Because I think you can go to the gym and waste a lot of time there, which I certainly did when I was younger. So to show up at a facility where people are teaching these movements, teaching weight training, and someone can watch you do it and watch you do it well, and teach you how to do it better. Like I think that's, to me, is key. Is just you need some like an entry point, because if you just like show up there by yourself, like I don't know how effective that's going to be.
Yeah, and I think most of the time, like obviously we both love fitness, and you can see fitness as a trend. Where most of the trend is like, oh, just sweat as hard as possible for an hour, and then that's how you rate a good workout. And for me, it's like, well, are you stressing your body enough, like with compound movement, right? We're going back to the Wolff Law principle, which is how you build stronger bone, which is the more stress you place upon the bone gradually, the stronger the bone will adapt, right? So if you're just doing like high intensity cardio all the time, again, if you're not eating well and you're in calorie deficit, your energy is burning more, you're gonna have stress fracture. You're doing the opposite, and I was trying to have a conversation with parents, especially when we have young athletes coming in. They're like, oh, what's the best way to prevent this? I was like, honestly, the best way is you as a mom, as a parent, get into the gym, bring your kids with you.
Yeah,
I was
be the
like,
example.
Yeah, because like I'll tell you what, 9 out of 10 times when I see a fit mom, the kids follow suit.
Yeah, and people say this a lot about, and I mean, this really applies to anything in your life, but, I don't have time, I don't have this. It's like, it's priorities. Like, that's all it is. So, yeah, I mean, people have busy schedules. I get it. I certainly do. And I've had busier schedules too. But, like, as far as, like, I make it a point to get to the gym. Like, no matter what, is like I make it a point to do it because it means something to me, and that's a priority in my life. And part of it is, like, you have to prioritize it, and you have to be an example to children. Like, this is something that's important that you do for yourself, because you can't really take care of other people in the world if you're not taking care of yourself. And I think we could see that in medicine too, right? So, so it's hard to encourage people to be healthy when you're not doing those things yourself. And, so be the example is super important.
Yeah, I love that. Let's dive into the medicine part a little bit, because obviously you're in the trenches. We're both in the trenches. You are at the place where you get to see them before I get to see them.
Yes.
Right? So the conversations start with you. You kind of set the tone. If we have a really good, like physician that we work with and they set the tone for us, it's easy.
Yep.
We don't have to like demystify anything at all. So how do you set the tone of having a straight, honest conversation with the patient, especially if they're on the path towards like chronic disease?
Yeah. So, I mean, I work essentially in orthopedics. So I see a lot of people. I mean, I'd say, I'm not like treating people's diabetes, but I see if you take, 100 people with diabetes, I'm sure 99% of them have back pain, right? So like, or have arthritis, and that's what I see. So, for me, the first thing starts off is like, is this person, like, I have to get a sense, like, if they're receptive to even wanting to have those conversations. And I say, unfortunately, like, a lot of people just aren't. A lot of people show up in my clinic and they like want me to fix them, and they want to go on their way. They don't really want to put in a lot of the time, the energy, the effort, the money, right? So that's part of it, is like, okay, who can I talk to about this? Secondly, so when I do find somebody, either someone who I see kind of people sort of chronically misdiagnosed or kind of blown off a little bit, like, yeah, your back hurts, like, just stop doing everything and like take these pills, have a nice life. There's PTs, and, there's some that are better than others. And I've seen these people who kind of get caught in these cycles, but who are like, I want to do better. Like, this isn't right. This doesn't feel right. Or I want to keep doing this thing. I've been told by 5 other people, just don't do it anymore. And so when I see that, then it's like, okay, so now I can start kind of dealing with that situation. And part of it is, one is I show them their deficits. So I think, I went to PT and it didn't work. Okay. And it's like, can you stand on one leg? Oh no, I can't. Okay. I don't know what the PT was doing with you, but it's wrong. Like, can they like activate their glute med, like side lying with their like hip like abducted and extended? And most people can't. And I say, okay, see, you've been in PT for 3 years. You can't even hold this against gravity. So that's problem number one. So I think a lot of times people go, oh, okay, like, wait a second, there is something here for me to fix that's not going to be the traditional kind of physical therapy. So part of it is like showing them their deficits and getting them like realizing, like, okay, like, this is a problem that I can fix and I need to fix, and that's maybe why I'm having these issues. And then also like saying, like, I'm not trying to take you out of anything. Like, I want you to keep moving. I want you to keep doing all the things you're doing. I usually tell people, like, and I see like a lot of weightlifters and stuff who say like, oh, like, it's deadlifting, whatever. And I say, or squatting, like, should I keep squatting? I'm like, squatting will help this if you're doing it the right way. It will make it worse if you're doing it the wrong way. So yes, you can, but you have to make sure you're doing it the right way, and you have to make sure the Pillman's watching you and all that. So getting them in that conversation of like, I'm not trying to take anything away from you. Like, let's keep this going. And then it's a matter of connecting them with people who I know will help them. So, and like locally, there are people that I refer to that I know, like, this person, if I hand this person over, they're going to get the kind of attention that they need. They're also going to get the right evaluation, and they're going to be given the right kind of set of tools. And I tell people too, is like, you get what you pay for. So a lot of these people don't take insurance that I send to that I have a lot of faith in. And I said, listen, this person doesn't take insurance, or it's not going to cover the whole thing. But this is, again, it's priorities. Like my ability to move well and not be in pain, I'm going to spend money on that over everything. Other people, maybe not, or maybe they can't. You have, but I'd say like, if you're not going to spend money on this, then that's on you. Mm-hmm. And that's something I tell people too. So listen, my back doesn't hurt, your back hurts. Mm-hmm. So if you don't want to do what I'm telling you, then okay, my back feels fine. So so like that kind of stuff too is like, I try to make people see kind of like, listen, I have somebody who's going to help you. You have to put the energy in, the effort, the money, mm-hmm. but it'll pay off for you. And I've never had one of the people who take me up on that almost universally are like, I'm so glad I did that.
Yeah, it's so funny because we obviously like with our price point, what we do, mm-hmm. we're out network, we spend one-on-one time with our patient, and we always have a conversation of like, oh, well, why should I come to you guys mm-hmm. and this and that. And the biggest thing for me is it's not about why you should come or not come to mm-hmm. us. It's depend on what problem you're trying to solve, how fast you want to solve this, and what does it mean to you to solve this problem. Right. I think sometimes it's going back to goal setting is mm-hmm. people stop setting goal for themselves. And actually one of the saddest thing I've heard, I was at a conference, it's like, at people, the last time people had someone clap for them to congratulate them was in their high school graduation. Mm-hmm. And then from there, people stopped setting goals. Yeah. And then because there's nowhere to climb, right? Where mm-hmm. people are kind of in limbo, and every time we get someone even calling us, we always ask, like, what are you trying to get into? Like, what, right. like, because if you don't have a goal and you just want to solve a back pain, we're not really a good place for you, because we want to help you move the goalposts where mm-hmm. you want to solve the back pain because you want to get into this, right. because you want to be able to do this, right? All right, so right. now we have a common understanding of right. how we can get you there. If it's just a pain problem, then I can't compete with Tylenol when it's $5, right? Because that's just pain relief. That's right. and plus we're, like I think in the medical field too, another thing we're battling is not only that the marketing, the consumerism mm-hmm. that's pushing upon people is like, oh, you only have this problem is because you have pain. Right. And therefore, if you get rid of the pain, you don't have this problem. Right. But not really, just masking the pain. And right. You're just prolonging, you're snowballing right. the effect into it. And like, so talk me through about how you navigate that on a daily basis, especially the challenges of having that conversation. Because mm-hmm. as a provider, we have to meet people where they are. Right. And sometimes when we meet them there, it's very hard to get them to go to the next step. Right. So what are some of the tips that you would suggest to the listener now so they can start changing their perspective of how they should view their health? Yeah. So, I mean, part of it was like, I'll have people who come in and say like, they'll have like a meniscal tear or something. Usually that's a fairly common thing. And they're like, is this ever going to heal? And I'll be like, probably not, might not. But, it doesn't have to be painful. Or it's like they have an MRI of their back and it looks terrible. And they're like, oh my God, is this ever going to go? No, probably not. It'll probably look like that forever. But it doesn't have to hurt you. It doesn't have to affect how you're functioning, or can affect you less. I'll say that. And I just had somebody come in the other day who was like, this is hurting. And, can I run on it, or is that going to make it worse? And I was like, okay, well, here are the options, right? So either don't do anything and it might never get worse, or do stuff that you like doing and see what happens. Like mm-hmm. that's the option. Like, so we can try to, we can do some injections. We can, obviously we're going to get these people hooked up with physical therapy and encouraging them to work on all of those things. But at the end of the day, like the fear of like this pathology worsening, is actually not like, that's not where we need to necessarily be focused. And most things, we don't need to be focusing on that. It's like, you have to accept that, okay, I might not be 100% pain-free ever, which is, we're going to live with that because there's some structural issue here. But then also, the alternative is you shut down your life and hope, fingers crossed, nothing worsens. And again, something else is going to go wrong. Mm-hmm. So it's like, it's better to be moving than not moving. Mm-hmm. So if you like walking, you like running, let's do it. Let's try to figure out ways around it. Let's try to figure out ways that we can make it more comfortable for you. But we can't like just shut down everything because we're worried about things getting worse. Mm-hmm. There's ways to do it such that we can make sure it gets better. So I was telling people to like, let's try to like get you doing the stuff you want to do as much as possible. And then we kind of worry about it at that time rather than just like shutting it down and hoping nothing ever happens, because there's so much more. I've said this a lot too, is like the benefits of metabolic health, the reward of metabolic health
comes at the expense of, you know, the risk of orthopedic injury at times like that. So you have to accept that risk somewhat, that you might get injured doing something, but if doing that thing keeps you metabolically healthy, it's much better to be metabolically healthy and risk an injury than not do anything and then just kind of sit on the couch and fade away, you know.
But here's the thing, right?
Yeah.
There's also risk of not doing anything.
Of course.
Right? Because we have to weigh out the risk. And the way I looked at it, like the biggest risk and the biggest thing that would scare me the most is to get to the age of 85 and not be able to travel, not be able to move around. Like I remember the first time I went to Venice and I saw these two old couples. You just tell like they just retired, this and that. They couldn't move.
Yeah.
Like one, like both one in a walker, the other one in with a cane, and they just can't move around because Venice is not like handicap friendly whatsoever. I mean, the whole thing is covered in water. So I'm like, man, like, so I saw that. I was like, okay, that's not where I want to be. Yeah. Because if I don't want to be that, what do I need to do now to change my course of the future? And the best the best population I like to work with, especially with the active adult, is when they're in the sandwich generation, where they see what the parents look like at the older age, and they see what the kids look like. Because the kids is what they used to look like, but the parents what they're heading towards. So they're in this gap where like, oh man, I don't want to look like my parents, because I don't want to be able to be wheelchair bound. So I was like, I better do something about it today. And then I have my kids, which I used to look like that. Like, what do I need to do to actually get back to who I was in one of those things? And then for me, once they get to see that gap, they can have something to thrive for. And I think it's going back to like, hey, maybe set up, it doesn't have to be a goal. Just have a vision.
Yeah. Or know what you don't want to become, you know? So, I mean, so many people, so if you lose the ability to get up from a chair unassisted, you have lost your independence. And that sucks. So what do you have to do to avoid that? Or, you know, if you can't, you know, we see a lot of injuries that happen, a lot of sort of a predictor of mortality is, you know, people sort of stepping off of curbs. Like stepping down from something. Most people hurt themselves doing that. Can't control their bodies when they're stepping down off of something, or like down a set of stairs or down off a curb, something like that. Or, you know, people tripping not because they're not lifting their feet up anymore, and it's like carpet can take you out. So like, you know, things like that where we have to sort of like, okay, like, what do I do to prevent myself from getting to that point? And it's not like it doesn't happen overnight. There's like there's a dwindling of your capabilities that, again, like to accept that, oh, well, you know, we see this a lot too in the gym, like guys used to like, oh, I used to do all this stuff in high school, whatever. And it's like, well, now I can't. And, oh, well, like, wait, why? You know, why can't you do that? I think a great thing, something I think it should be more kind of, should be part of like annual physical exams is like some kind of physical test. So, I mean, I use like the CrossFit Open as like my kind of thing every year. I kind of see kind of what I'm doing and what I need to be better at and all that stuff. But like whatever it is for you, like if it's a 5K you run every year, all right, see like every year, are you roughly in the same place, or like, are you, you know, whatever kind of physical challenge it is. I mean, there's certainly, you want to kind of involve all aspects of movement, like whether it's weightlifting, gymnastics, endurance, kind of something that encapsulates all of that. But like to kind of check in with yourself every year and be like, am I able to do that? And why not? If I'm not, then what happened? You know, and is it something that you're okay with accepting? Because if not, then we need to kind of work on it.
Yeah. I mean, I love that. Having a benchmark. Yeah. Right? Something to measure yourself against. Yeah. So that way you know exactly where you're at. Like, I mean, obviously, I mean, there's a study I always reference is that people who step on a scale every single day and do nothing will tend to lose at least 2 pounds more than people who don't. Just because, again, you can't get into a car and drive here and be like, oh, I have no idea how much gas I have. Yeah. You can't make a decision that way, right? So based on what you're seeing now, and you know how like, we touched on it briefly, how the current medical model is just to preserve life rather than to expand the quality of life. Yeah. If you were to be given a magic wand that you can wave over and then change the landscape of health and the medical field, what would you do differently? Oh, geez. What wouldn't I do differently is kind of the more important thing. I mean, I think ideally what I would like to see as far as, you know, there's sort of, I'm thinking of like a health clinic, but it's like a health space. So people have their primary care doctors, and but I don't
necessarily think that's like the best way to make sure you're healthy. And you need, because you need, it's beyond here's some tests and here's some labs and here's some medications and go home. Like that's sort of like, that's the like, here's not how to die. And that's the model, right? But I think about it as sort of like, what does health look like? And that involves a lot of things, right? So physically, nutrition wise, then there are the actual like medical pieces of this, but whereas physicians are sort of quarterbacking the coordination of care with all of these kind of professionals, and it's sort of about maintaining health. So yeah, there's the medical piece of it, and there's labs that need to be done and optimizing things for both people who are unhealthy, but also people who want to just perform better. And then connecting that with the physical therapy space, with the training space, so that people can, if I see somebody and it's like, yeah, you need to lose 20 pounds. Okay, that's really great for me to say that, but okay, what does that look like and how do they do it, right? So ideally, I'd like someone to come in and say, okay, yeah, you need to lose some weight, and here's exactly how you're going to do it. Here's this person who's going to do this program with you. Here's someone who's going to give you a meal plan, who's going to check in with you. And then if you still need a medication or something like that, I got you in that end. But like, here's the plan. This is how you do it. And I think that's where we sort of fail people in medicine, and people who truly want to like work on themselves, which again is not the majority, unfortunately. But people who really want to do better, and they need a plan though. You can't just tell people to lose weight and say, okay, we'll see you, and hopefully it happens, because it's hard. It's hard. People don't know what they're doing, or they think they're doing the right thing and they're not, and they think they're eating well and they're not. And it's ideally, it'd be nice to have a space where people can come in, get their health screenings in all capacities, and then also be connected with people who can actually maintain their health. And the whole kind of Glassman's model of like the sickness, wellness, fitness continuum. So we are really good at kind of like keeping people out of the sickness space, but that does not mean you're healthy. And like ideally, the space that I'd like to work in is try to getting people to health and then keeping them there, because it's a maintenance program too. So and part of that is like a physician, like we don't have tons of time to do that. But the idea is like, can we connect people with the right people who do, and then just kind of oversee the process, make sure everything's going in the direction we want to see it in. So that's ideally how I would like, medicine to be set up now. And then, then there's still the traditional model for the people who want it. It's a lot of algorithms, unfortunately, in medicine. It's like someone has this disease or this problem, and you order these 3 tests and send them these 3 medications, and then in X amount of time you do this. And that works or doesn't work for the people that are in that system. But there's a whole bunch of other people who are kind of looking for, how do I get healthier? How do I change my diet? How do I change my exercise? Like, what do I need to do? And there's like, that's not a lot of good advice out there, or it's coming from all kinds of places, and it's a little bit all over the place. So that's how I would like to see things change.
Yeah, I love that. And I think it's all started with having conversation like this, right? Because I think what's great about the society we're in is that it's capitalist based, and it's supply and demand. Yeah. If there's enough demand of people asking for these kind of things, now we can have that kind of conversation. Like, oh, great, you want that? Great, we can set that up. And again, not everyone's going to ask for that. And I think where I like to say where we fail in the medical field is that we stop telling people that health is an investment. Yeah. Where most people, again, people always talk about 401k. Hey, by the time you retire, how much money you want to have, this and that. No doctor come in like, hey, by the time you're 65, what do you want to be able to do? Yeah. What is something that you're looking forward to doing in your 80s, right? No one's talking about that. Yeah. And if we can start shifting the narrative of, oh, hey, by the way, I have this insurance, they will take care of me. Like, no, insurance company is not there to take care of you. They're just there to make sure you don't die. Right. But like, they're not going to be invested. And the longer you live, the longer you cost, the more money. I mean, to be frank, you have to look out for yourself because at the end it's ownership over your own health, right? You are the byproduct of the decision you made or didn't make down the road. So I think to get people to have ownership, and I think the concept of ownership is scary in the beginning because you're like, oh my God, everything's all on me. Right. But then 5 minutes later, it's liberating. You're like, oh wait, everything's all on me. Yeah. I can make decision. I can change the way I want. Exactly. Yeah. So I think having that conversation is huge, because the mission that I have for Myokinetix is to have this kind of education, supporting people, and then give people access of care that they wouldn't have, or even perspective, right? The reason that, like, I'm so thankful to you here is that people who listen to this, they can start changing their perspective, how they view their life and their health. And then when you start planting that seed a little bit, 5 years from now, that seed's going to grow bigger and bigger. Hopefully. And now we have a better conversation, right? But the whole thing is that we can't stop now.
Right.
You know, how do we keep this momentum going?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, I mean, I think for me, what I've found what helps is like trying to connect with people who are like-minded. Right. So that's how like we connected, and, you know, the people that we know in common, and we're sort of like all thinking the same thing. And it's like, okay, how do we sort of synergize and like get our message out there to people who want to listen? Because I think there's sort of two ways to look at healthcare and like remodeling it. And it's like, there's like this revolutionary model. And it's like, we just tear everything down and start our own thing and like burn it to the ground and start a new one, which is great. It takes a lot of coordination and investment and all that. And then there's sort of like an evolutionary way of looking at it. And it's like, okay, well, how can we kind of work from where we are and kind of shift things slightly, but sort of all be moving in the same direction? So, you know, so that part, you know, I work for a huge health system and they do things the way they do things. So, you know, right now it's like, okay, I've connected with some physical therapists in my area who I trust and gym owners who I know. And it's like, okay, well, how do we we create our own little ecosystem of how this works? And then the idea is like, okay, how can we then build on that? Because like, we're doing this little thing in where I live, and it's like, you've got your thing going on over here. It's like, okay, how do we make these things talk to each other? How do we find more people that are like us? So, I mean, I have ideas about how to best do that, and working on some things and cooking up some stuff. But you know, but ideas first is like having the conversation, then identifying the people who are on board. It's like, okay, who's with me? You know, and okay, now that we have the providers or the people who want to make this work, okay, how do we then propel that forward? So that's kind of part of the process, what we're trying to do here.
Yeah, I'm definitely not the burn the boat kind of guy.
Yeah.
I'm more of a like, I mean, like, this is why, like I say, it's a blessing every day I get to do what I do, because people come to PT at the most vulnerable stage.
Yeah.
And especially with the clinic that we have. We work with season-ending injury, people who, you know, about to get back surgery, etc. But then we, because of our model, we get to actually have conversation.
Right.
Like, hey, you see how you just did that? Great. Like, all right, cool. Like, we have 6 stages of like where we get people through, and the last stage is relive. And in the last stage we say, hey, if you get to relive the life once again with the knowledge that you know, of what you know now going through physical therapy, how would you do it differently? Yeah. And then get them to think about that. Now they can say, hey, I'll probably go to bed early, I'll probably make sure I stay hydrated, I'll probably make sure I'll eat the right thing. Like, so like to me, that is the end goal. Like, because we can spend so much time, and again, we see ACL, UCL. Yeah. Some people stay with us for like over a year. This is great time. Like, I mean, I get to see kids from like high school to them about to get married. Like, to me, like, great. This is awesome. That I really get to like see the transformation, and I get to, you know, throw in like a little information then and there. Like, the biggest thing for me is if you guys even listen to the podcast, how it started in the beginning to where it is now, totally different scope. Yeah. Right. We're just trying to evolve. And I think if we go on the burn the boat route, not only we'll lose a lot of people, it's too disrupted. Right. It's like the first time Uber came out. Yeah. Or like now the AI is coming out. Everyone's like, what's going on?
Yeah. And also like thinking about, you know, you talk about rehab. So I think people traditionally, the idea is like rehab happens and then it's over. But like every day that you're moving, there are rehab opportunities, right? It's a rehabilitation process of sort of like how you're moving. So take, you know, how would you relive things going forward? It's like, oh, like how I'm moving all day is actually an opportunity to reevaluate for reevaluation, right? It's like how I'm bending down to pick this thing up, how I'm moving this thing from point A to point B. It's like you sort of programming people to sort of think of it that way. It's like, it just doesn't, you do your 6 weeks of rehab, then you're done. And it's like on to the next thing. It's like, there's opportunities for you to be kind of working on these things continuously, because you don't, most of the time, a lot of these injuries are things that are sort of brewing for a long time with these chronic crappy movement patterns. And then all of a sudden something happens, you know? So it's like this idea, like, all right, let's kind of reframe even how like PT fits into people's lives, because it's happening all the time, you know.
Yeah, I think it's for me, it's the intention behind it. If we can educate people on like why we do things, why you should feel a certain thing, why you should pick up something like that, now people have like something to measure themselves against. And like I took this from Bruce Lee, right, when he say like, I fear not the man who practiced 10,000 kick, but one kick 10,000 times. Yeah. To me, it's like, that's every day. Right. Like the way you wake up, the way you get up and out of your bed, the way you walk up and down the stairs. Right. I do legs twice a week. Guess what? Every single week, I'm going to try to make sure like my movement pattern's better.
Yeah.
Because if it's not getting better, it's getting worse.
Right. And it's correct creating habits too, I think. So it's like physicians, we can tell people to do stuff and they can say, okay, I will or I won't. But it's not until those things become habit that they're actually effective. Mm-hmm. So that's where, for me, it's a lot about connecting people with people who can help them form habits. So people who are going to talk to them about why it's important they move this way or why it's important they eat this thing. Because a recommendation is one thing, and that's kind of where what I can make, and then it's like, all right, now who's going to help you incorporate this into your life every day? And like that's really where like change happens in people's lives. Mm-hmm. So it's important to find those people who can help kind of reiterate the message.
Yeah. So I got a couple last questions for you. Yeah. Just bigger picture. Sure. So obviously like you're taking on some big changes, especially in the system that we have right now. Yeah. So obviously there's a lot of work ahead to do these kind of things. Yeah. Based on that, what make the juice worth the squeeze for you?
I think it's sort of what maybe drives all of us that are kind of in this field is like this idea of like moving people towards a better place. But I think also what I enjoy doing is sort of showing people that there's kind of a better way, or that there's that stuff that they want to do, it's possible. It's just a matter of like they just have to find the right person, or they have to find the right team behind them. So for me, I know that there are people doing stuff that's really cool, and people are helping people in really amazing ways. And I sort of see myself as a bit of a quarterback of that situation. And I'm like, okay, I know these people are doing really cool stuff here. This person who really can use their help, and they need to just connect. And like for me, that's really exciting when I make that connection for people, or when I see people who've, have been in PT for a while, and then I just tell them, you're in the wrong place. Let me find you someone who's gonna help you. And then they come back and they go like, oh my God, this was like life changing. And I'm like, yes, like that to me is like so exciting. So small wins, and to think that can be happening on a larger scale is pretty exciting. So I just think that there's so many people, so many providers, and then a lot of coaches too, who can kind of even take it a step further after people sort of graduate beyond the physical therapy realm, who can help maintain those things in the community. That I'm like, okay, like if we can just all kind of coordinate. So I'm my goal is to help coordinate all of that. So that really is exciting for me to see people have these really great outcomes. From just matter of just not being aware of like either what they're not able to do, what they should be able to do, not knowing the people to talk to, and then finding the right person who helps them. It's like, okay, great.
And I love that. Yeah. I love that you said that, just because it's kind of the opposite of the old school way of medical field, where it was a lot of ego driven. It's the fact that you become like a connector with like, hey, by the way, this is my hat that I wear, and you know what, you need that. That's the person you need to talk to, because one of my core values I say is that I believe in, with great people we can accomplish like extraordinary things, but and my role is to be a connector, to connect people with other people. And then from there, we can have a conversation like this. And that's how we actually achieve real change. Because if you want to go far, you can't go alone. Yeah, right? Exactly.
It's like, I think being able to work well in teams and is really important, because there's things either I don't have time to talk about, things I don't know in great detail, but if I know the person who knows that stuff really well, then great. Then we can just kind of feed off of each other and to make this work better. So I'm all about that. I enjoy that quite a
bit. The team aspect is so cool, because we say this all the time. Like we have 4 clinicians downstairs, and we always say, hey, by the way, like this is your team. Like you're not just seeing me, you get to see a lot of people with different different perspective, right? Because I'm only limited to my own bias, right? And I don't want people to not get better because of some shortcoming that I have, right? I think having that team approach, it's what they do in professional athlete, and we can bring that to, for people who actually value their health, like that would be really good. Because then, guess what? If I have an off day, I can count on someone else within the team that will catch something that I didn't see.
Right. And I think there's also a lot of, I think certainly in the sports medicine field, because there's so many different kinds of providers that are in the space. And there's a lot of like shots fired as like, and I think it's easy to sort of point at physicians to be like, I've seen this quote a lot. It's like, oh, if a physician tries to give you a pill, they're a drug dealer, they're not a provider. And it's like, okay, well, part of it is that the kind of patients that usually like we see as physicians are very different than the person who kind of walks into a gym, walks into a PT space saying, I want help. Those people have already made a decision that they want the help, but then also are going to seek you out for it. Whether they continue with it or not is another thing, but they've already like made that step. Whereas people who come into a physician's office for pain or whatever the issue is, a lot of times they're not necessarily bought into the idea of helping themselves or wanting to necessarily put work in to help themselves. That they're like 3 steps behind where they are before they even get to any of the other kind of providers or coaches. So I think it's easy to say like, these physicians just give them medicine. It's like, well, because a lot of the people we see, that's what they want. And if I don't give it to them, then they're going to go write something nasty about me online. Like, honestly, like that's what happens.
Or they'll go down the road.
Right. And then someone else will give it to them. Right. So I think like that's part of it too, is that there's this kind of idea of like, it's easy to kind of point fingers and say that, physicians aren't doing stuff right or whatever. And, on the other hand, I've seen a lot of like the patients that we've been discussing that like, I see like they were just sort of written off because the physicians who are kind of trying to help them don't have athletic backgrounds themselves. They're not in the strength and conditioning space. They don't really know PT beyond the kind of, very kind of traditional kind of insurance model. So I see it on both ends of how things can be better, but also how like it's a little bit unfair sometimes, some of the heat that we get. But ultimately, because I'm someone who's interested in that stuff, and I'm like part of the community, as far as like working out and stuff like that. So I've met a lot of great people through that community, and I want to help kind of get everyone in the right place. So for me, it's just a matter of like, how do I connect the right people with the right people? So that's what I enjoy doing.
So before I let you go, people who listen to this like, oh wow, that's a lot of information.
Yeah.
The question would be, is it ever too late to start?
To start like working out?
To start taking care of themselves and to change for a better future?
No. So the thing is like, there's always room. First of all, there's like, you could something that's really great, and no matter who you are, is that you can always get stronger no matter who you are. So there's always that benchmark. So part of it is like, you can always get stronger, and there's ways to do that. And then it's important to there's never a point of no return until essentially the point where you're not independent anymore. And you don't want to get to that point before you decide you need to turn things around, because at that point it might be too late. But you can like I said, there's very rarely are these things overnight changes. These things are slow erosions of abilities that happen over time. So if you can kind of catch that slide before it gets too far, you can always improve it. And maybe it's not going to be perfect, but there's always room for improvement. There's always a way to get better. There's always things that you can be improving. And even if you start small, just start looking at your sleep, or just start making one change in your nutrition, or just start working out one time a week, or just getting more active than you are now, it's a step in the right direction. And there's hundreds of steps you can take. So if you just start with one, so it's not overwhelming, that's at least something to start with. Yeah.
Chase small win is the best thing. Last question.
Yeah.
If you were to be able to put up a billboard anywhere, what would it say?
Just put up a billboard. I mean, I think sort of echoing that statement, but it's like, there's a couple I can think of, but one is that you can always get stronger. I think that's kind of the idea, is that you can always, there's always opportunity for that. So take it. Like I said before, the reward of metabolic health is worth the risk of injury. So, problems of fitness are much easier to solve than problems of sickness. So, and as someone said this to me online the other day, said, it's easier, you can replace a joint, you can't replace a heart, or it's much harder to replace a heart. So, working towards making yourself as metabolically healthy as possible, even if there's some physical risk involved, is ultimately going to pay dividends in the end. So it's a long billboard, but you get what I'm saying.
No, again, we all take risks driving every single day, right? Everything in life is about risk management. And I think what people don't look into is the risk of not taking action. The risk of inaction, to me, is greater than taking action itself. Because when you take action, you can at least say like, oh, whoa, I should have done that. But then you learn from it. You get a feedback from that, right? When you don't take action at all, you have no idea. You're just in limbo.
Right.
So that's a huge thing. Amy, thank you so much. I really appreciate this.
Yeah.
So if people want to connect with you and they want to work with you, how do they go ahead and do that?
So on Twitter and Instagram, it's at Amy West MD. So that's probably the easiest way to find me. If you want to contact me through there. And then, I work for Northwell Health. So people who are in the area and want to schedule a visit can look on the website.
Any telehealth option?
There are, depending on the issue and the location and stuff like that. But sometimes it's possible to do, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Hey, I think I have to get you back on here again.
Let's do it.
It's
I'm
been
down.
super fun.
Awesome.
I want to dive into more about the metabolic stuff because we didn't even
I know there's so much to talk about. Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah. We haven't scratched this. We didn't scratch surface on that. So, but thank you so much. Let's get you back on again. I appreciate your time. Thank you for driving over here.
Yeah. Thank you.